Tag TV and Tag Radio. Be seen and heard by both technology users and technology producers throughout the state of Georgia and around the world. Low cost, big benefits, powerhouse online branded video and audio has arrived. Tag TV, Tag Radio. There's a lot more to know. Not a global logistics executive or logistics technology innovator? Well, it may surprise you to know Georgia is host to the only industry-driven, state-led event of its kind and size in the nation. That's right, the annual Georgia Logistics Summit. Opening today, and only in its 5th year, organizers anticipate yet another record attendance, with some 2,000 public and private attendees from states across the country and from nations across the globe. Georgia, globally competitive resources, expertise, and direct facilitation, trucking, rail, air cargo, ocean cargo, warehousing and distribution, retail and manufacturing, logistics, a center of innovation, and where Georgia leads. Greetings, everyone. It's Tuesday, March 19, 2013, and this is Tech Talk with Technology Association of Georgia President Tino Mantella. I'm your guest host, Frank Baia. Up to the Tech Talk. We explore the unique and current, yet ever-changing logistics landscape at a global and national and state level with Paige Siplon, the Executive Director of the Georgia Center of Innovation for Logistics, the state's leading resource for fueling the industry's growth and global competitiveness. Under Paige's leadership, the center created and hosts the annual Georgia Logistics Summit and also delivers multiple publications, including an industry report and widely respected and sought-after Logistics Market Snapshot, consumed by tens of thousands of professionals around the world. Paige is a frequently requested keynote speaker and has been quoted as an industry expert in publications such as the Journal of Commerce, Fortune, NPR, Wall Street Journal, Reuters, American Express, and beyond, a list that also includes Site Selection and Economic Development magazines, as well as referenced in statewide newspapers. Recently ranked in the top 10 logistics professionals in the nation, Paige has also been selected as one of the top 100 most influential Georgians. His career filled with leadership, recognition, appointments, roles, and committees by federal as well as state government agencies and executive officers. From the impact of new transportation legislation to fuel prices, demand for detailed supply chain visibility to the volatile global and domestic markets, workforce training and retention to the rapidly advancing disruptive technologies. The Tech Talk gets a just-in-time delivery of what's up at the annual summit that begins today and what's next for Georgia's logistics industry as we speak with Paige Siplon. This edition of Tech Talk is brought to you by Globalspeak.com, new media consultants, corporate video and audio communications, video and audio production and distribution, live and virtual event production. Tag TV and Tag Radio is a service of Globalspeak.com, creatively delivering powerful marketing, video, and audio solutions. Paige, welcome to Tech Talk.
Hey, thanks, Frank. Thanks for having me.
Well, the excitement's got to be mounting after months and months of working and planning. The annual Georgia Logistics Summit starts later on today.
It does.
The only industry-driven, state-led event of its kind. By the 3rd year, you were pushing, 1,600 people. What kind of numbers are we looking at for today?
Yeah, we're going to have close to 2,000 people, maybe even some more than that, joining us today from all over the world. Last year we had 28 states. This year we've got 9 different nations. Israel's bringing in a delegation of technology and logistics providers, and it's just amazing how fast it's growing. Really flattering to have everybody here in Georgia talking about logistics, talking about technology, and the changes that are coming our way.
One of the things that I think in a lot of cases from an amateur standpoint looking in, there's a tendency to think of logistics as not necessarily being software. It's containers, it's physical content being shipped around and moved around. Certainly logistics software and those kind of things have been part of even enterprise resource planning and just-in-time delivery and all those kind of things for years. But talk a little bit about the maturing of the industry. I mean, how would you define innovation now, today? What's going on in the logistics field?
Yeah, it's exciting. Things are definitely changing. You know, if we think back, the innovation of a steel container, most of the stuff that we bring in and consume as Americans and as individuals and as consumers comes in through our ports, comes in through big metal boxes, containers that come from China primarily. And, that innovation of a steel box is only 50 years old. The innovation of a rectangle and bringing things in from China is a relatively new concept. So,
and disruptive. I mean, it radically changed.
Definitely a game-changing technology.
We're talking about the actual tankers being changed and designed to fit the containers, right?
That's exactly right.
So, when you think about relatively how soon it was, but how much impact it's had over, well, you say 50 years, but almost a geometric kind of progression, almost exponential as it's progressively impacted one change after another. But I had to pause for a second and to tell you that I agree with it. That's pretty amazing how it all just began with, hey, wait a minute, how do we organize this in a more engineered way, if you will, put it in a common shape at a common weight and be able to put more on per ship, per basis. And of course, trucking now plays a role, too, with the piggybacking as far as containers are concerned.
Right.
Taking some of your thunder away, but I get excited about it because, once again, you deal with, so many times when you deal with technology, you're dealing with intangible and not the tangible. To be in your field, you deal with both, and that's, I think, pretty exciting.
Yeah, no, it is. Again, the container to the things that people more think about when it comes to innovation, the new iPhone app. And there's a lot of those, new iPhone apps and software and technologies, from RFID tags to, really solving the problems on the way that we consume products, and us as consumers, we're making it a lot more complicated, and that's not going to slow down anytime soon. You think about how we order products. This innovation, the thing they call the internet, right, of ordering products online is a relatively new phenomenon too, and is definitely shaping the way that we have to deal with logistics and supply chain. We go on our phones now, or we go to Amazon.com or Walmart.com or really any of our favorite store.com, and we expect that there's going to be, if not next day shipping, at least really fast shipping, and then we expect it to be free. That's a game changer as far as how we deliver those services as companies. And the way logistics shapes that.
Again,
we take it for granted.
Radically impacting even the manufacturing process. I mean, no more warehousing, or at least not the kind of warehousing we used to see, say, 50 years ago, just-in-time delivery. And in even some cases, when you're talking about if there's hardly any traditional retail that's still around, which obviously there are, but even in those cases, like you say, they're not carrying inventory in the back room in 20 different colors. They're being driven by some app that's connected to a device which is a remote exchange or a consumer device within the store that not only sells but reorders at the same time.
I'll give you listeners a perfect example. If you go to NikeID.com, this is Nike, right, a big global name. They've got an online customization platform that's generating, this is a few years old number, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue for them, additional revenue, where you can go on, and my son's done this, go and order, frankly, the most hideous colored things you could think of, yellows and oranges, and do it however you want, and order that one pair of shoes to your door within a couple days, that one item. And that changes, again, if we think about what that means to logistics. We certainly take it for granted because that's kind of neat and that's interesting, but maybe we think about it too much because folks like you and I get excited about it. But, the layperson says, well, that's just the way it is. Nike's doing a great job. But now they can't order that pallet full of black soccer cleats from China or wherever they're manufacturing them and bring them in. They've got to order. How do you do that? And manufacturing it and then getting that manufactured product to that customer or to my son who wants to consume that very special pair of shoes. And again, I expect there to be no shipping, and I expect it to be there within a few days.
I'm not sure, but I think I saw an ad just recently for a Fiat that does the same thing.
Yeah.
Where you can actually customize. I'm sure they do it with a Bentley or something for decades, but having it mass produce the kind of product that we're talking about, it kind of segues into another thing that I'm curious about, and that is obviously, on one side, you've got this exponential, rapid change connected to all of the disruptive technologies we've been talking about. We've talked about it for decades, about it being in a global economy that's totally integrated, and obviously containerization, all the things that we've kind of touched upon. Okay, now, I'm either an existing small to medium-sized company and I'm trying to survive, or I'm even a startup that's looking to get into a business that's going to be involved in logistics. How do you even consider the role that logistics play in a company's growth and obviously its competitiveness?
Well, yeah, at the end of the day, logistics, and I get asked this all the time, what is logistics? And, you can Google it and find lots of different definitions. At the end of the day, it's about moving products to customers. And we just went through, how that movement of a product to a customer, whether it's a Fiat or a pair of Nike cleats, is different, right? That movement changes, and we're making it, again, more complicated. So there's a lot of different places for startups and entrepreneurs to carve a bit of improvement into that process to make it a little bit easier for consumers to connect with your product or to get your product, because it takes both sides of that. You've got to be able to supply the product, but then the demand side of that, you've got to have a way for consumers to easily get access to place their order. So I think there's lots of different ways that startups and entrepreneurs can fit in there, and those are the things that big companies like Home Depot and others are looking for to grow their business.
Well, and you're talking to a degree about B2C. Also,
yeah,
I mean, you got
exactly right.
but you got B2B as well, right? I mean, you've got you've got players on. One of the things that's kind of interesting, great minds, if you will, the Georgia Technology Summit that's coming up is talking about global commerce revolution, and it's really not talking about digital currency. It is, that's part of the disruption, but what it's really talking about is the global massive number of actions and reactions that are happening across this whole network, if you will, literally, figuratively network. Innovation in every interaction. One of the things I'm curious about is big data and analytics affecting, one of the speakers at the GTS is Visa, and it's not just Visa local, it's like Visa global, 20,000 transactions a second, billions of customers, millions of B2B customers, in other words, their clients, the institutions themselves. The numbers are like mind-boggling. Does your industry concern itself about the levels of, obviously not does it concern, but how does it concern itself about the levels between B2B and then B2C, and does it consider big data and analytics and try to look into those kind of things?
Oh, of course. I would say that, a lot of times the transaction, the data, the information, big or small, is a lot of times more valuable and more important in many cases than the actual product itself. Movement of that data and movement of that financial transaction can be a bigger deal than moving that pair of soccer cleats from, point A to point B. And again, a lot of technologies that fit in there. If you think about B2B, we talk about the demand side of how we use our iPhones to order stuff online. That's definitely a big part of logistics. But as, to use your phrase there, B2B, think about how we're ordering those products to a distribution center. How are we sourcing those products to be distributed? That's a B2B relationship at its core. And, so I guess it doesn't really matter what kind of products you're moving or what kind of business you're in. Logistics is going to play a role. You may call it something else. You may call it sourcing. You may call it something else. But logistics is going to be in that core. Because at the end of the day, if you're not moving products to customers, you're collecting things, right? And, that's not a great business to do.
And I don't think you're threatened, at least not immediately, by 3D printing, right?
No, well, that's going to shape, it's a great example. That's going to shape the way that we do manufacturing, and it's going to shape the supply chains. It's going to change the kind of commodities and how that demand chain and that supply chain fit together. That's going to be another, I think, game-changing technology that's going to shift the way we do things and make it faster, better, and cheaper, because that's what we want as consumers. We want it faster, we want it better, and then we want it cheaper, if not free, to be able to get those products.
One of the messages, clearly, and it doesn't matter the vertical you picked, and that's every industry, is everything is the same, only different. Each one of those verticals are being impacted. They're all going through the same digitalization, if you will, and cloud impact and all of those kind of things. Talk a little bit about, I think in your industry, omni-channel commerce. What's that about?
Yeah, well, I think that it's a tag phrase, pun intended, that really describes the way that logistics is changing. It used to be called multi-channel, where you had all these different channels that your consumers and your customers needed to be and demanded to be able to access you by. You take a step back, and it was the fax machine, and then it was mail, and then it was email, and now it's your cell phone, and now it's your online orders, and now it's all these different fulfillment channels that I need to be able to accommodate, these multi-channels of commerce that I need to be able to facilitate. If I'm a logistics provider, I need to be able to accept those orders and fulfill them. And those channels keep getting more and more. And so then that's multi-channel, right? Pretty simple concept. being hit from a lot of different ways. Well, now the idea of omni-channel is, okay, well, now we need to meld those all together and be able to use multiple channels in sort of an omni-channel way to be able to fulfill those orders even more in a more streamlined way. And that's sort of the new way that companies are thinking about how they're going to grow and compete by using omni-channel commerce. Great examples are companies like Carter's, who just relocated their headquarters to Atlanta. It makes the baby clothes in Oshkosh B'gosh. Great example, building a 1 million square foot e-commerce fulfillment center up in Jackson County, just north of Atlanta. And, that's going to be a huge piece for them because that's where their industry is going. And we see that story across the board, that this omni-channel commerce or multi-channel commerce is playing a big role. And technology is 100% the driver behind that.
No, absolutely. I mean, as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, I'm not sure that the Georgia Logistics Summit even comes close to identifying. Obviously, it is what you're talking about, but it's almost a summit about innovation. Every aspect of our daily lives, every aspect of our businesses, no matter what that business is, has got to be impacted in your meeting today and talked about in some way or another in that meeting today. Talk a little bit about give us just a quick overview of some of the things that you guys are going to be doing and talking about.
Right, yeah. So let me answer your question, though, because that's a great you make a comment on your point there. The word innovation, and we definitely talk a lot about those changes in the industry and how to eke opportunity out of them. We concentrate on that pretty extensively. It's part of the reason why the summit's grown in such popularity. But you think about, and I don't want to get too wordy here, but you think about the definition of innovation. If you look it up, it's really at its core the introduction of something new. And again, no matter what kind of business you're in, we got to continuously be introducing new things, be fresh, do it in a new way, in a more competitive way. And then that couldn't be truer for logistics, right? The introduction of something new, whether that's a new RFID tag or a new way of doing business. And that's the kind of stuff that we talk about. And again, technology plays a big role in that. But.
Well, I don't know how you would call it anything else, but the other side of it is one of the things I'm constantly challenged by is that semantics doesn't keep up with the evolution of technology. So there's no way that you can, when we talk about clouds or networks or channels, I mean, sometimes they can have multiple definitions, and then sometimes when something new happens, one of the things we do, new media, is sort of like, well, what does that mean? And then you have a word like logistics that has such a strong brand identification as to its definition, and yet what you're describing is, the cliche would be not your father's Oldsmobile.
That's exactly right. A lot of new things have been introduced since the Oldsmobile, or my father's Oldsmobile, right? And we've got to be able to keep up with the changes like that. Well, I guess tongue-in-cheek, I would say you don't have to, but you're not going to be a growing, competitive, compelling company to do business with if you don't.
Well, that brings up the next question. Tough one. How does Georgia stack up?
Well, I think just stacks up in a lot of different ways. Specifically from a logistics point of view, the way I've started describing it is we are uniquely complete, right? When you think about it from a logistics point of view, there's a lot of places that have railroads and a lot of places have a lot of trucks. Some places have ports and airports. I would submit that none of them, and maybe your listeners can go look around, none of them really have that top-ranked national, global leaders in all those different modes in one place. With the world's largest airport, right? We've all been through it. The fourth largest seaport, more railroad miles than any other place in the Southeast. We graduate 51% of all the truck drivers in the Southeast come from the state of Georgia. And the list goes on and on. I mean, so we've got a really uniquely complete platform from a supply chain point of view. And the last piece of that, last but not least, is technology, right? So over 400 different technology companies that are focused on logistics as part of their core business that we've identified in partnership with TAG. Big ones like Manhattan Associates and JDA that's got a huge presence here. Descartes. I mean, the list goes on as far as the large sort of industry leaders as far as size and expertise goes. And then on down the list to some much smaller companies that are doing some of those innovative new things that we talked about before around B2C and B2B that have a significant impact on logistics, but frankly a lot broader than that, impacting retailers, impacting manufacturers, improving security, improving cost effectiveness, all these different things. Well, we've got hundreds of them here in Georgia, and I would say that lots of states can't offer that.
Well, and obviously the evolution of that is it impacts economic development. I mean, obviously what we're talking about in the long run are jobs.
Yep.
And when you start talking about, you know, you were talking about the definition of innovation, the fundamentals of economic development, inbound investment, or expanding existing industries.
Yeah.
Tell me how either one of those operate without a sophisticated logistics environment. And when you start to describe the way you're talking about Georgia's environment, let's talk just for a second about how important is this whole thing to the state's economic development.
Well, that's why we do what we do, is because, you know, logistics, and we see this coming up more and more often and more frequently, that, you know, those prospects that are looking to figure out, or traveling around the country, maybe traveling around the world, trying to figure out where they need to grow, where is their next branch office need to be, where do they need to relocate their headquarters to be able to be more competitive. Not only is Georgia usually on that list, if not at the top of that list, they're coming with their VP of supply chain or their technology director earlier in the process. It used to be you had a procurement guy or girl that would handle that later. They'd figure that piece out. Now it's a critical decision factor. You know, Site Selection Magazine said that it's one of the top 3 decision factors for why sites are selected, regardless of the kind of thing you're building, whether it's a manufacturing plant or whether it's a distribution center or even a sales office. Logistics and transportation is going to play a deciding factor earlier in the site selection process, earlier in the economic development world that we live in. And, you know, again, and it's a pretty easy sell, right? We've got all these things. If you move products to customers, you can do it to anywhere, by any mode, to any customer from the state of Georgia. And yeah, that's right. And then you get all the benefits of the Masters in Atlanta and the Braves and Savannah and Tybee Beach and all the wonderful things that
Stop. I want to move. Stop. I want to move. Well, I'll tell you one thing, and again, it almost sounds like hyperbole, but the reality of the situation is I'm not an expert, but I generally bounce around with a lot of information, events, activities. Not too many of them have grown as rapidly and as impactful as yours has in such a brief period of time. I mean, hats off. I think a lot has to do with, they say perfect storm, right people at the right place at the right time. The other side of it is that sometimes just making it happen, getting off the sidelines and stepping into the game. You guys have done a great job with the Innovation Center and what you're doing with the Logistics Summit. And I got to tell you, the other side of it also is that we're converging. I mean, all of these subjects are getting so the same thing, only different, like we said earlier, that it's a frustration if you like to think that you want to kind of stay on top of what's going on, not to exaggerate, but say be somewhat of a big thinker, mosaic thinker. I'm saying to our listeners, how could you not go to the Georgia Logistics Summit? So the real challenge is how many, what I was just going to say, the next thing we'll do is we'll have to talk to Cisco about beaming us in a couple of different places simultaneously.
I tell you, it's a good problem to have, as they say.
Well, hats off, and congratulations on what appears to be yet another incredibly booming success, and all the best of luck later on this afternoon, and maybe we'll get an opportunity to do a little after the show and talk about all the events and activities that happen at the event.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I'd love to catch up with you later.
Well, knowing where we are in the time frame and what you got facing you, thank you so much, Paige, for taking time out of what's got to be a crazy busy schedule to join us today on Tech Talk.
It is busy, but I wouldn't miss it for the world. Thank you very much.